Today we're going to continue talking about branding. All right, last class we started to talk about some of the power brands. Remember we started our discussion talking about different channels of distribution, and also importantly we focused in on different modes of entry, which is critical to us being a global marketing organization. So we need to determine how it is that we're actually going to penetrate a particular market. So once we decide that we're going to pursue a market development strategy, that's going to be our growth strategy, which means increase the sales of our current products in new markets. Then the question is, well, how are we actually going to do that? How are we going to penetrate the market? And remember, we talked about a variety of different approaches, including internet. Right? We said selling on the internet is one approach to penetrating a market. And we said there's different levels of risk associated with each of these modes of entry. We talked about licensing and franchising, exporting, joint ventures, foreign direct investment. And that's an important part of international marketing. We also need to talk about branding and the role of branding, because one of our goals certainly is to have a powerful brand, because that's going to help us maximize our sales. Why is that? Why is the brand so significant? Do you remember that we said that the brand is what's wrapped around the product? You remember we said that all products in a given category have the same generic functionality? What does that mean? Like, let's say the product is air conditioners. What does that mean if we say all air conditioners have the same generic functionality? What do you think, Harvey? Go ahead.
They all serve a purpose to make the room cold.
Right. So they provide cooling. But what makes one product different from another?
Brand identity.
Right. Each is wrapped in a unique brand.
What about the fact that one's more efficient, one's better technology?
So that's an excellent point. So the question is, well, how do we communicate that our product is more efficient, or ours is priced at the higher end of the market, or at the lower end of the market, or that our product has any number of given features and benefits? That's through the brand. And that's why it's so critical to understand the role that branding plays. Because you remember when we talked about advertising, like for example, the Super Bowl. We know that a lot of money is spent on advertising during the Super Bowl. But if there was no such thing as brands, then there would be no such thing as advertising. Does that make sense? What do you think?
Oh, I thought a different question asking you about brands.
Okay, but what do you? We'll come back. We'll touch on that in a second. But what do you guys think? I mean, does that make sense to you? Because otherwise, all the products are the same. Remember, the role of the brand is to differentiate, to distinguish one product from another, and to communicate value. And building a brand is costly, but you can achieve brand equity. So in other words, your brand can achieve a high level of value. And that's where we sort of left off last time, was we started to talk about some of the power brands. And I shared with you that the Coca-Cola brand has an estimated value of about $68 billion. And it's important to emphasize that that's not the value of their corporate headquarters. It's not the value of their inventory of soda in the warehouse. It's not the value of their office equipment or office furniture. It's the value of something intangible, which is their brand, which is why that's so impressive to realize that we have the ability as global marketers to do that, to create a powerful brand. But it starts with creating a brand name, but it's not enough to determine a brand name and to create a logo and a symbol, because determining the brand name, there's a number of ways that we could approach that. And sometimes a lot of time and effort is put into trying to select a brand name that's suggestive, meaning that it implies some benefit of the product. You follow what I'm saying? That there's a relationship between the product and the brand name in terms of the name that's selected and how it relates to one of the key features or benefits of the product. But take, for example, Pepsi. What does that have to do with beverages, soda, quenching your thirst? It doesn't. And I'll tell you from my experience, that's okay. Because determining the brand name and developing the logo, that's really the easy part. Even though companies spend a lot of money doing that, and there's some companies that will spend a lot of time developing thousands of different brand name alternatives, if you're a capable marketer, the real challenge is to create those brand associations, to create strong, unique, and favorable brand associations. Then your brand could mean anything. Your brand could embody world-class consulting services. Your brand can mean high-quality beverages. Your brand could mean anything that we want to communicate to our target market and target audience. So you're not going to get a lot of mileage from coming up with something that you think is clever, that there's some sort of connection between the brand name and the services that we provide. That's really not going to get you a lot of forward momentum. Take Kodak, for example. Kodak is a very well-known brand, but it took them years and many billions of dollars to communicate to their target audience that the brand name Kodak means what? There's a strong association between the Kodak name and quality film products, photography. So there's an association between the Kodak brand name and photography. But what does Kodak mean? Does anybody know? Does that mean something? Does that mean in of itself, that word, doesn't mean photography. It's a word that they made up. In fact, the founder, it's not even his name. The founder of Kodak, his name is George Eastman. You might think, oh, maybe it was George Kodak, but it's not. Not that that means that that's what the word means, but I'm just saying, like, how did they come up with the name? So what I want to emphasize is that the real challenge is, as we think about taking an existing brand into a global setting, is that we have to shape what that brand is going to mean in that market. So you might already have the brand name, you might actually already have the logo and the symbol. That's great. It's going to take time to develop that. You want something that's compelling. We know the difference between a logo and a symbol. Sometimes they're used interchangeably. Like, for example, and they shouldn't be, because there's definitely a difference between a logo and a symbol. But did you ever notice, take for example, what I'm writing here are all branding elements. So now, take for example, everybody knows what this is? Wow, you guys are good. I feel good. I feel good. You guys think that this is an alligator? You guys have an IQ that is off the charts. That's amazing.
It's the Pansky.
Now, yes, the Pansky. Look at this. Now, did you ever notice, tell me if in your experience, if you've encountered this, where people will say the logo, they refer to this as the logo on the polo shirt. It's not a logo. It's not a logo. All right, so so this is actually a symbol. A symbol is what we call a non-word mark. All right, in branding, that's the term that we use. A logo is a word mark. And I'm sorry it's not more creative, but a symbol is known as a non-word mark. So both...
So like this would be a logo? Hollister?
Right, that would be an example of a logo. So what's the difference? Both are graphic representations of the brand name, but the logo contains words. What are the words? It includes the brand name. So the logo and the symbol are both representations of the brand, graphic representations, but the logo includes the brand name and the symbol doesn't. So if we take, for example, this is the new logo for Pepsi, and this is their symbol. Why is this so compelling when we think about global marketing? Why is the symbol so significant? Now, mind you, that's a strategic decision on the part of the management team. All companies don't have symbols. Some do, some don't. So Pepsi, they have this symbol for many years, and variations of this symbol, not exactly, right? They've adapted it over time, and their logo has changed over time, but a good contrast would be their arch rival, Coke, doesn't have a symbol. They have personality symbols. They have, I think Nuvakov mentioned last time, there's some question about whether or not the bottle, the Coke bottle, whether or not that's a symbol. They haven't used that consistently, but on some packaging, they have that bottle, right? You know, that glass bottle. It could be, but the thing is, you have to, there has to be a connection between the two. So that there's got to be an association between this symbol and the brand name and the brand personality, the brand attitude. The brand is a very complex entity. That's something that we have to shape in the minds of our target audience, is what does the brand name represent? Now, some brands are positioned, right? Positioning is the space the brand occupies in the customer's mind. Some are positioned as fun. But that's not a criteria that all brands have to adopt. Some, that's not important. For some, it's not that it's representing fun, but it represents professionalism. So in some categories, professionalism is important. Or maybe high quality is important. Or in some cases, durability is important. Do you see the difference? Like in some categories, maybe durability is not so important. Like maybe clothing, for example. Do you agree? I mean, when you think about something being durable, when you usually think of a product like what? What would be an example of something that you would associate with durability?
Car, shaver, car.
A car? Yeah, that's something that really takes a beating. You wouldn't think
Snow boots.
of your jeans as
Shaver.
being
Snow boots. Naruto. Shava.
Yeah, you have one of those?
Yeah, I got one of those.
When are you going to use it?
I have a taste tonight, so should I do it?
You want? Plug it in. Yeah.
It's okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like something like reliability or durability, that doesn't really apply to jeans per se. Like what does it mean your jeans are reliable? You wash them, you hope they don't fall apart, but that's not the same thing as saying it's reliable. Like every time you start your car, or try to start your car, right? The engine is going to turn over. You see what I'm saying? So it's not relevant. So it's up to us to decide what our brand is going to represent. What is the identity of our brand? And there's 4 key components that we use to evaluate, right? There's 4 branding criteria. Memorable, protectable, adaptable, and transferable. These are branding criteria. So we need to determine whether or not our brand name, our logo, our symbol, our tagline, packaging, trade dress, whether or not it meets this criteria. That's what we should be trying to achieve when we say that we have a compelling brand identity. And you see why it's worth doing this. Yes? A lot of companies are realizing now, obviously somewhat late in the game, that having a power brand is an indication of a company's success. And what companies trying to do is have a portfolio of power brands. So for example, we said that Coca-Cola, the value of the Coca-Cola brand is about $68 billion. IBM, $60 billion. And Microsoft, $55 billion. GE, $47 billion. So it's substantial. Even if it was not $47 billion, but $47 million, you would think, well, $47 million is a lot. But $47 billion? So companies are accumulating power brands. And in some cases, what they're doing is they're not creating their own brands, but they're acquiring other brands. Because to create a power brand from scratch, a power brand, right? A brand that has a high level of awareness, for example, and a high level of purchase intent. It means customers are intending to buy products that carry that brand. It's going to require an investment of about $500 million over approximately a 3-year period. And so there's some advantages of doing that and some disadvantages. Because to create it from scratch, that means that it's going to be somewhat of a slow build. As opposed to, and it's going to take us obviously a few years to achieve our goals, as opposed to buying a brand that's already established, already has, if it doesn't have 92% brand awareness, at least even if it has 70%, and we can continue to invest in that as one of, let's say, our stars in our portfolio. Questions? Go ahead.
Do some companies only have symbols?
What was that?
Do some companies only have symbols?
Like what?
Like
I mean, you need to have, you don't need to have a logo per se, but you're going to have a brand name or a name for your company.
No, I mean, sorry.
Apple.
I should rephrase. Do some companies not have a logo and only a symbol? Like Apple or Ferrari. I mean, unless you have a Ferrari logo with the word Ferrari in the logo, it's just a symbol, right?
Question.
Oh, you mean because, oh, I see what you're saying, like with Starbucks.
Anything. I mean, Starbucks has Starbucks.
No, I mean, so I'm trying to understand like your example because like Starbucks is like you could argue that the logo and the symbol are really
Right, but now,
all in one.
right now Starbucks doesn't even have a logo because it's just the
They got rid of the wording around
They got rid of the wording. So now it's just a symbol, I guess, right?
Well, that's because they broke into international markets.
Well,
AppNet.
yes, we're gonna get to this, Daniel. That's what I'm leading up to. Is yeah, if it doesn't have the brand name as part of the graphic, then it's just a symbol.
They did it for Japan.
So does that make sense? You guys follow? So
But a logo would have to be the same kind of font and everything, right? It's the look, not the name. It's the look of it.
well,
Like, you can't write Pepsi in any like font and color and still be a logo, right?
well, absolutely. One of the key things that we want to do is once we establish the look, once we establish the design of the logo, what that graphic representation is going to be, then we want to implement that consistently. So sometimes we don't want it to be, sometimes it looked like this, and then sometimes it looked like this. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't ever change your logo. You can, but once you change it, that's it. Like, move forward, and you need to invest in that, because what we want to achieve is brand recognition. So brand awareness has two key components. Two key components to brand awareness: brand recognition and brand recall. Brand recognition means that we recognize the logo or symbol or packaging at the point of purchase or wherever it is that we see it. But very often, it's at the point of purchase. Brand recall means that we retrieve the brand name from memory. Two very different purchase dynamics. So if we go into a restaurant, for example, and they say, Stepansky, thanks for coming in today.
That's a brand right there.
Yes. What would you like to drink? Now, at that point, you have to retrieve from your memory a variety of brands. All the brands that come to mind is called the evoked set. So let's go around. I want everybody to give me the name of a beverage, a brand name. All right? You guys ready? You can do it. Yes, you can. Right? So all the brands that we're going to come up with now is the evoke set. All the brands that come to mind. The consideration set is only those few, or maybe even one brand, that we would actually consider purchasing. So do you see the difference? You remember we talked about this as it relates to like Lamborghini? Did I share with you guys? Sure, we're all aware of the Lamborghini brand name. A very expensive car. But when you think about consideration set, is that really in our consideration set? So yeah, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, Ford, Toyota, right? All of these brands are in our evoke set, but then there's only some brands that we seriously consider purchasing. Now, unless you're actually very wealthy, then Lamborghini is not in the consideration set. So you see the difference? Yeah. And also, importantly, so when we do research and we test, we try to understand the level of brand awareness, and we're going to look at both aided and unaided awareness. We need to understand purchase intent. Because even though Coke might have a very high level of awareness, let's say on our team, to say, yeah, well, the brand awareness of Coke in our group, on our team, is 100%. Everybody on our team is aware of the Coke brand. So, is that enough? It's not enough. That's not enough for us. What we need to then know is that what is the level of purchase intent? So what percentage of those on our team would actually consider purchasing Coke? Now we might find out that the purchase intent is very low, because even though everybody here is aware of the Coke brand name, nobody here drinks soda. Everybody here drinks orange juice. You see the significance? You see why that's important? Why you can't just stop and say, let's just find out what the level of brand awareness is. Of course, it's important. You want to know what the level of brand awareness is, but you need to know what is the level of purchase intent, because that could be a very real situation. So that's great that everybody is aware of the Coke brand. What percentage of them drink soda? We need to understand that. And it's also particularly relevant as we think about global marketing, as we think about, let's say, as a domestic US company trying to sell our product in many markets around the world. So going into a particular market and doing a country analysis and finding out that there's a high level of brand awareness is not enough, because it might be very realistic that in some markets maybe they don't drink soda. Right? That's not like crazy. Maybe they just really don't drink soda. Maybe they drink juice. We need to know that. We can't guess. We need to make fact-based decisions. Josh, go ahead.
Isn't that the same thing as like top of mind awareness? Something kind of the Evoke set? Essentially? Because like...
Yeah, well, top of mind awareness is the most enviable position to have. So top of mind is the first brand that comes to mind. So that's another metric for us. So it's not that just that people are aware of our brand, because there's a difference between aided awareness and unaided awareness. Unaided awareness is what I was suggesting us do for this exercise, is go around the room and ask everybody to name a brand of beverage. That's unaided. Aided is, I would ask you, have you ever heard of the brand Pepsi? Have you ever heard of the brand Dr. Pepper? See, that's different. So in some restaurants, they might say, well, what would you like to drink? And you have to retrieve from your memory the brand name. But they might say, well, what would you like to drink? Would you like Pepsi? Would you like Sierra Mist? Then that's an example of aided, well, that would be an example of brand recognition then, because now you're recognizing the brand. Right? It's a type of aided awareness. So the top of mind brand, the first brand that comes to mind. So if I say to Belsky here, I say, Belsky, tell me 10 beverage brands. And the first brand that he mentions, that's top of mind. That's very insightful. We want to know what is the 10th brand on his list, but certainly what Josh is pointing out is that, yes, there's significance to top of mind. What's the first brand that comes to mind? Why do you think that's so important when we're thinking about the Evoke set and then making the connection? With the consideration set.
Neither of those necessarily indicate purchase intent, though. If somebody tells us to mention a car in all of our Evoke, or in our Evoke set might be a Rolls-Royce, BMW, but our consideration set might not have the same things whatsoever.
Right. So we had mentioned that we need to understand purchase intent, but I'm saying in this situation, why might that be significant if we're talking about beverages?
Because maybe he has purchase intent for that first.
Yeah, that it might be that the first brand that comes to mind is the beverage brand that he would purchase.
You also have to make sure, like, you know, this person doesn't work for a certain, you know, like he works for Coca-Cola but he doesn't drink it. So first thing off the mind is Coca-Cola, or, you know.
Right, well, we need to also, we're going to have to ask specific questions about purchase intent. Absolutely. But we also need to work with the information that we have to try to draw some conclusions. But actually, that's correct. There could be some other factors, like, well, why is it top of mind? Well, he works there, his brother works there, somebody right there, some association. But, well, it's okay for us to ask, once they reveal that, well, would you actually purchase Coke or Pepsi or whatever the brand is? Right? That's part of our research methodology. It's okay to ask that question. That's what we're trying to find out, is purchase intent. Now, sometimes, depending on who we're doing the research for, we might be a little shocked when he says Coke, and then he said, would you actually buy that? And he says, no. You're sort of like falling out of your chair to try and process that. Well, what do you mean? He said, I asked you to name a group of beverages. The first one that that came to mind was the Coke brand, but you tell me you wouldn't actually purchase Coke. And then that's where he's going to say, you know, well, I only drink milk. Not with meat, though. Okay? So, questions? Comments? All right, so let's continue talking about the branding criteria. So a brand, when we're creating a brand, whether it's the brand name or the logo or the symbol or the tagline, the packaging, the trade dress. Right? Last time we talked about the significance of trade dress and packaging. Remember we said that color can be an important branding element, that sometimes a particular color is associated with a particular brand. Like Kodak has a very strong association with that brand name in yellow. And Daniel shared with us the strong association between Tiffany, the Tiffany brand name, and that sort of turquoise blue color. Why is that significant? From that brand's perspective and also competitors.
Well, if someone has a good experience with a certain product, and they associate the good with that color, then they'll be likely to associate when they see that color that other brands with that color might also be
Well, absolutely.
Their consideration set.
Absolutely. So what's going to happen is, after we've invested billions of dollars in creating a positive reaction to a certain color or a certain packaging design, then what some companies have done, now of course this is absolutely illegal for them to infringe upon our trade dress and our patent and our trademark or our copyright, but companies will do this and they try to push the envelope. Of course, they're going to try and then come up with packaging that has a similar look and feel or uses a similar color scheme. Because what they think is going to happen is when a customer goes in to purchase the product, that they recognize the packaging design and they might mistakenly think that it's their brand of choice. That it's the brand of product, of a particular product that they usually purchase. But then, usually when they get home, is when they realize that, oh, wait a minute, this is not, but the packaging might almost look the same. It might even be, in some cases, some companies are so bold to even make the packaging identical. But trade dress and packaging design, color, those are things that can be protectable, especially if they're unique. So let's take, for example, let's compare these two logos. Now, I think you were suggesting that a logo can evolve over time. And right, this is their current logo here, but that wasn't always their logo. In fact, before that, they had a logo that looked something like this. So let me ask you, I want to get your opinion. When we think about these two logos, because they were here, and this was their logo for quite a while, And in fact, what's so compelling about this logo is that it was something that was adaptable, that over time they continued to enhance it, change it, improve it, especially as graphic design over the last 10 years has made so many leaps forward that they kept adding all these different graphic bells and whistles, if you will. The ability to add a sort of a little shadow behind the logo, an outline behind the font, and so forth. All these little design elements that are not dramatic changes, but they were able to adapt the logo over time. And then they decided to take a very dramatic change in the way their logo appeared. And they went from something that resembled this to this. And so I want us to think about these two logos and compare them and ask you, which do you think is more memorable? Which is going to be something that you feel is protectable or more protectable and adaptable and also transferable? Now for us, all of those are particularly important, especially as we think about global marketing. Because transferable means that our brand is going to transcend geographic boundaries, cultural boundaries, ethical boundaries, religious boundaries. So it's important, remember when we talk about taking our brand outside of our home market, that it's something that is still relevant and it's not going to be offensive. Remember when we talked about Pepsi? And when they introduced Pepsi into the Chinese market? No? You don't remember that? Pepsi in China is pronounced Pepsi. But the thing about the Chinese language is they don't have an alphabet. They have characters. And these characters, whether they're simplified Chinese or traditional Chinese characters, these characters each represent a word, a concept, a symbol, an idea. And so you could group together a certain number of characters to have a phonetic translation. So a group of characters can be pronounced the same phonetic translation, but they have a different meaning. So one of the beverages that you might mention, if we went around the room, might be Red Bull. What is the tagline that's associated with Red Bull? We give you wings. Now I got one better for you. We give you wings. When Pepsi introduced their brand into China, the Pepsi brand name translated to, we bring your ancestors back from the dead. Now is that impressive? What, you gonna, I drink this, you give me wings? I drink this. This will bring your ancestors back from the dead. Now that's a brand promise. I think it's great. But
sounds like Mulan.
right. So, but what do you think? What was the what do you think was the reaction in China? What was that? Yeah, they're offended. Why? Why would they be offended?
Because they're very into their ancestors. I don't know.
So yeah, the Chinese culture places a high value on heritage and ancestry and culture. So they didn't think that was funny, right? They weren't amused by that. So we need to have that type of cultural sensitivity, and we have to make sure that we don't make those kind of mistakes. Chevy introduced a car into Mexico. They thought, I got it, coach, yes, global marketing. Wonderful. Think global, act local. So they said, we're going to try and sell a small Chevy in Mexico. Oh. And so in their infinite stupidity, they introduced the Chevy Nova. Now, regardless of what dialect of Spanish you speak, most Spanish-speaking people would agree that Nova means no-go. how many no-go cars do you really think you're going to sell? How many? A lot?
2 or 3.
Not too many. So these are things that we're responsible for, that we need to account for as we develop our plan to market and brand our product outside of our home country. No, you change your mind? Go ahead.
Is you saying Pepsi released like Pepsi into China and like this whole fiasco happened?
Right.
Wouldn't they have looked into this? Like, don't they do their research beforehand?
You would think.
Don't assume.
I'm trying like why didn't they like? Yeah, like what's the like?
Yeah, because they never took my class. So
Keys to lunch.
big companies make big mistakes. I mean, you would think Chevy, Nova, at least, even if you didn't do the research, right? Even if you didn't do branding research, because what you should do is a linguistic search. That's what we do in branding, is a linguistic search. And basically a linguistic search will search a database for as many languages as we want. Sometimes it might be 2 languages that are relevant, maybe 3, 5, 10, 12, whatever we indicate, and it'll search to see if that brand name translates to something in another language, right, other than English, right? What does it translate to in Spanish or French or whatever the language is? So you would like to think, you didn't have like one Spanish speaking person in the office. Somebody said, hey, Nova, doesn't that mean no-go? Linguistic research is expensive. But somebody, don't you, everybody knows a little, un poquito? Come on. You don't know enough Spanish? Anybody took Spanish in high school that works in the office that would say, wait a minute, Nova, that means no-go. Isn't there like a disconnect between that and cars? Like cars that are no-go? Like, what can I tell you? Yeah, big companies make big mistakes. Yeah, Evan?
Should we discuss also the thing with Gerber baby food? The babies on the...
Africa. In the book, it's a book about like they sold baby food in Africa, and like it had pictures of babies on it, and people thought it was ground up babies.
Yeah, so in other words, in that market, yes, and I think also Evan was referring to the idea of selling insurance, life insurance to babies, right? Is that what you're thinking of? No? Yes?
No.
You don't remember? Okay, but yeah, there's also another issue is that in some markets, people think that the picture on the package is what's inside. Now, for us as marketers, because remember we said that everybody cannot read the Latin alphabet. They can read, but they can't read the Latin alphabet. So they could read traditional Chinese characters. They could read simplified. They could read Hebrew. They could read a lot of different potential languages, but not necessarily read the Latin alphabet. So the challenge is, well, how do we deal with that? Because if you're really selling in 100 different markets, it's very challenging. And you might think, well, just change the packaging. Well, that adds a huge amount of complexity to say, well, in this market, it's going to be in Spanish. In this market, it's going to be, we'll have Japanese packaging and so forth. That's not ideal from a logistics standpoint. So, packaging laws, there's some ways that we could deal with that where we might be able to have multilingual packaging. Because if there's a graphic that's like your logo, for example, or ideally it's an integrated graphic that might be your logo and your tagline, then you don't need to translate that. But if it's like what is the ingredients or how to use it, then that needs to be translated. So to your point, this idea, they thought that probably this was creative, but in the United States, that's where they didn't connect all the dots, right? Because in that market, people, as you suggested, think that the picture on the outside is what's in the bottle, what's in the package. So that's not so crazy. You see, a lot of times you go into a store, you see cans on the shelf, and they show pictures of beans, or they show pictures of peaches. And so in that market, they think that way, and so they saw the picture of the baby, which is really more of a, you could say, like a personality symbol, sort of like Betty Crocker, for example, is a personality symbol. And all through the years, if you go to the Betty Crocker website, you could see how they've demonstrated that that's something that's a branding element that's adaptable. Why? Because if you look at the timeline, they show a picture from 1950, 1960, 70, 80, and so on. You could see how her image, now mind you, this is the image that they would put on the packages of all the Betty Crocker products. Are you familiar with the Betty Crocker brand?
She stays the same
Yeah,
age.
well, she stays the same age, but her look is different. Like her hairstyle is like the hairstyle of the 50s and the hairstyle of the 60s and so on. And so her look changed as trends changed so that she could still be relevant.
Modern.
Right, so she could be modern at that particular point in time. But it's interesting to see all her pictures, like a dozen of them, side by side, like every 10 years, you can see how she looked.
Barbie also.
Barbie has also changed her look.
And dimensions.
There's a variety of aspects of that product that they changed. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I pulled it up here on my laptop.
Oh, Betty Crocker?
Yeah.
So how does it
All the
look?
different years.
Yes, that's her. That's Betty Crocker.
Betty.
Avi, I can't see from that.
You want to try mine?
Yeah.
Did you pick this up?
Yeah.
We have
See it,
enough
Vance?
cord?
You got like perfect vision?
No. That's a.
We have plugged out from the cameras, all right?
From like a 4-year-old virgin?
Oh, man. Screaming off? Is it back?
You gotta keep it within time, basically.
Right, so she's keeping with the times.
She's with it.
She always kind of looks like Barbara Bush.
Definitely the
Don't got the branding.
So what do you think? Now that we've talked about these different branding criteria and understand why it's significant to us as global marketers, let's evaluate Pepsi. You guys tell me what you think. What do you think? Did they do a good job? Because I heard that they spent about $300 million to go from this to this. Now I heard that actually that Julian typed this in his laptop and sent this in, and that was what they went with. But before he did, they spent $300 million looking at other alternatives.
Big wow. What are you scheming over there?
We're
going on that beer.
What do you think? What do you guys think? All right, share with me your thoughts. Let's talk about this. Which one do you think is better? The old one or the new one? Using these criteria: memorable, protectable, adaptable, and transferable. What do you think about the new one? Is it memorable? Is this something that we're going to be able to get trademark protection for the logo, not just the brand name? Because there's two issues. One is the brand name that we want to trademark, and the other is the logo. So talk to us. Who's gonna share? Go ahead. Tell me what you think. Somebody, anybody. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the fact that it's like a regular font now, it might be a little more difficult to trademark it.
Yeah, it's not really, I mean, compared to this, certainly, this is not very unique.
Right.
I mean, this is a very stylized graphic that, regardless of the name, that's going to be something that you could get trademarked. That logo is something that you could get trademarked. Because it's so unique, the font is so unique, everything about the design is very customized, but...
Right, also they could have created their own font, for that previous, brand, logo, and if that was the case, then nobody else could use that font, no one could imitate it. While, if they just use the regular, something you get off of Microsoft Word.
Well, there's a little thing, they have this little squiggly thing in the E. But I don't think that changes your opinion very much, like, oh yeah, that's, I mean, especially when you compare it to where they were. Right? Because you guys remember this? I mean, this was only like not that long ago that they had this logo, and it was also it had this 3D effect. It was this 3D raised lettering.
I think because Walmart did something similar that I learned this. I don't think I read it either or learned it in one of the classes at Walmart. It also used to be like big block letters, and the reason they changed it was because people felt that it was too in your face, and especially because people didn't like Walmart a lot of their payment standard, like they paid people less, so they wanted to seem more friendly. So I think, and especially now, people are I think a lot of other companies are trying to go look more simple. So I think Pepsi is kind of trying to do the same thing, that we're not this big in your face company. We're kind of, we're like a chilled out sort of place where you don't have to worry about it, and that way they can still get in their mindsets as opposed to, like, let's say a big company like Coca-Cola.
So that's good insight in terms of what their motivation is, in terms of what they're trying to achieve. What do you think about the level of differentiation? Because remember, we said at the beginning of class, we said that one of the roles of the brand is to differentiate one product from the other. So if all the logos look like this, if Pepsi uses a logo like this, if Walmart uses a logo like this, if Cookie Crisp uses a logo like this, then all the logos look the same? How is that a good thing? So I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of what they're trying to achieve, and I understand maybe you want to go, if this is more contemporary, a little bit more minimalistic, simple, clean.
Coke and Pepsi have always kind of had certain similarities in that, they may not change at the exact same times in terms of what their logo looks like, but there are often very similar characteristics between when they do change over time when you compare them side by side.
So what does the Coca-Cola logo look like now?
Well, right now is a little bit different because Coca-Cola actually focuses on the wording, because they make it that red, very flowy script, and they do it in every language because that flowy script translates well into a lot of different languages.
And because it's memorable.
Right, so now is the first.
Right? I mean, they worked hard on creating a logo that's memorable, and like you suggested, in every market, they've interpreted their logo so that it's relevant.
Right. Whereas Pepsi now is shifting to purely a symbol because they can't translate Pepsi as well into the different languages of Coca-Cola.
So that's one of the advantages as a global marketer, is to have a symbol, because without words, this symbol is going to embody our brand name and our brand identity.
I do think, though, that, because I'm looking at Coca-Cola logos now, also Coke is now also going for a more, even though the name itself is still the same, how they show the name in the script sort of writing, it's still in a more of a minimalistic, as opposed to with all the flowy things in the background or a big like bottle in your face. It's not just Coca-Cola with just red. That's it.
And so is that a good thing if they have the same identity as Pepsi?
No,
Not the same. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, because Coke, you think of, you say, I want a cola flavored, you don't say, I grab a Coke. Rarely people say that, I'm going to go grab a Pepsi.
Yeah, that's so true.
You kind of just like, oh, they have Pepsi, I'm going to grab Pepsi.
They all taste the same also.
So if you're bringing together, it means it works both ways. Since Coke is the most identified soft drink.
Oh, but that's interesting. I'm wondering, I mean, do we have a consensus on that? Because, I mean, that could be, for you, it might be a low involvement purchase, and for you, you think, oh, I just want something to drink, I just want soda. It doesn't matter if it's Pepsi or Coke.
But if you really felt that way, then you would feel the same thing about buying like an RC Cola, but you don't.
Do you?
I don't drink soda.
Oh, you see what I mean? You see what I mean? But he knows about, he's aware of the Coke brand.
Didn't Pepsi also change their symbol around like the Obama administration election?
Well, they changed their logo and the symbol simultaneously. Everything became flat as opposed to that 3D effect. Their symbol also became a flat symbol. The other one was raised, looks like, yeah, like it had some depth to it, some dimension. And they changed it. They also interpreted it. First it was, for a long time, it was more of that sort of like yin-yang symbol. And then you're right, with the election, they had this sort of more of a swerve into it that looked like something that you saw in the election. So one of the key takeaways for us, and the reason why I'm taking the time to talk about branding, is because this has got to be transferable. We have got to be able to operate effectively outside of our home market. So we're going to have to be able to not only, let's say, export, we talked about mode of entry, not only export our product, but we got to, in many cases, export our brand, our logo, our symbol, and it's got to be relevant. And it can't be something that's offensive in any market. And that's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, there's so many cultural differences, even, for example, color. In different markets, different colors have different meanings, are suggestive of certain feelings or certain events. Like, who could give me a good example? Yeah, Daniel?
In Japan, white is the symbol of death.
Yeah. Now, that's, to some of you might think, what? Like, white?
Pure innocence, clean.
In the United States, that's a very popular perception that, like Daniel said, that white is something that means pure and clean, honest. You associate with things that are positive.
I think blue is calmness and soothing. That's why a lot of credit card companies, they go for blue.
And blue is actually America's favorite color. But take, for example, and this is really just like dumb luck on the part of Coke, but in China, red is very popular. Red is seen as very positive and lucky.
So is dragons. Because they're very into them.
Yeah, luck has a strong association with the color red. And so for the Chinese New Year, this is the year of the dragon. You should tell all your Chinese friends, Xin Ye Kuai Le, that means Happy New Year. And Gong Xi Fa Cai means I wish you a lot of money.
That's Chinese.
So health, happiness, and prosperity. So red. So you see, those are good examples. And so why is that significant? So who could connect the dots there?
I mean, it's about the whole culture of the...
Yeah, so take, for example, what we said was like red is an important part of the Coke brand identity. You want to sell soda to 1.3 billion people. In the US, there's 300 million people, approximately. In China, there's 1.3 billion people. Red is lucky. Red is an important part of the Coke identity. McDonald's, red and yellow. The Chinese flag is red and yellow. See, we gotta really, you gotta go country by country, all these things. When I said it, it's a blinding glimpse at the obvious. But do you see how compelling that is? For your brand identity to be the colors of the country's flag? Now, you can't change your brand identity in every market. I mean, one of the things we said at the beginning is we want to have consistency. Now, you could change the color of your packaging, but these are the things that we need to consider because we don't want to have this ethnocentric managerial perspective or this idea of one size fits all, that whatever we sell in the US, whatever the logo is, whatever the color of the packaging is, that we just try and sell that everywhere. Now, I admit, from a logistics standpoint, yes, that would be very efficient. But you have to ask yourself, are we going to be successful if we don't customize and tailor our product and our brand and our marketing communications so that it's relevant to the local market? And the answer is, no, you're not going to be successful. We need to customize to meet the needs of the local market. And that means not just the product, so all elements of the marketing mix. So including the price, the distribution channels, promotions, and certainly also the packaging. Comments? Questions? All right, so we're all on the same page? And we all see why this is significant as global marketers? Wonderful. All right, what do we have, 3 more hours? Why don't we take a last couple of minutes and let's try to go through some of the questions for Quiz B. All right, I gave everybody a copy of this. Let's go through these. If we don't finish it in the next 10 minutes, we could, we'll pick up next time. All right, so who's going to read the first question? Yes, go ahead, Evan, go ahead.
The success in the marketplace today, best companies will focus on country as primary segmentation variable. False?
Right, that's false. Why is that? Who could tell us why? Because successful companies are not going to just focus on segmenting the market by country. They're going to want to get down to the next level of detail and focus on psychographics, for example, which is the lifestyles and interests and hobbies of the target market. So that's a pretty broad generalization to say that when we're segmenting a market, which is dividing a market into sub-markets, or we could say when we're aggregating groups of customers that have similar needs and wants. So when we're segmenting a market, it's important that the segments are large, reachable, with similar needs and wants, and are going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way. Large, reachable, which means that we're able to access them with marketing communications. So you might say, what is reachable? What do you mean, reachable? So in other words, there's a way that we know, for example, what magazines that they read, or what TV channels they watch. Right? There's got to be a way for us to communicate with them so that we could build awareness of our brand and our unique selling proposition. And they have to have similar needs and wants, and they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way, which means, for example, that at a given price, a certain percentage of the customers would purchase the product. Or think about distribution, place, for example. What does it mean to say that they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way as it relates to place? So, for example, a significant percentage of the target market, let's say, purchases the product online. So I think that's a good example when we're talking about responding to the marketing mix in a similar way. In other words, that they're going to buy the product online. So we need to understand that. right? So some target audiences that we're trying to reach shop online. Others shop only in department stores. So does that make sense why we would want to, in that case, segment them, right? Keep them in separate groups because they have homogeneous needs and wants and they respond to their marketing mix in a similar way. So those are the criteria for segmentation. And there's a variety of different ways we could segment the market. Geographic segmentation is what this question suggests, that you would segment the market by country, but that's really too general. It's insightful, but it doesn't mean that that's going to get you to where you need to be. You need to then look at demographic segmentation, which is group segments or group potential customers by age group, by gender, by occupation, by education level. So you see how those demographic segments would have similar needs and wants, would be large and reachable. So the segment would be 18 to 25. And another segment would be 26 to 35. And 36 to 45. Those are all segments. And in a given market, we'll have to do some market sizing and determine how large they are. Because in some markets it might be 22%, 10%, 41%, 12%. Questions? And then there's the psychographic. So we talked about geographic, demographic, psychographic, and also behavioral. And we'll talk next time in terms of behavioral. We'll look at usage rate and also product benefit. Questions? All right, we'll take one more question. With indirect exporting, the company sells to a customer in another country. Correct, it's false. So in indirect exporting usually means that the company sells to a buyer. So a importer or a distributor, not to a customer. All right, so I'll see you next time.